Talk to you. I'm here with Arindam Dutta from HP BPO.
Thank you.
First time on the G6 panel. Did you enjoy it?
It was a pleasure.
Fantastic, fantastic. It was great to see you up there with the rest of the crew.
Thank you.
I'd like to have a bit of a chat to you, Arindam, today around the customer.
Sure.
There was a lot of conversation in today's G6 around expectations and value delivered to the customer and expectations on the part of that customer. So I thought it'd be interesting to have a little bit of discussion to kickstart this conversation on that point. So I'd like to ask you first of all, with respect to technological developments, are you seeing or do you expect to see a move on the part of the customer to take some outsourced processes back in-house and to automate them?
No, it all depends, right? If you really see the clients, what they're asking for is not platform. They're not asking for technology. What they're asking for is simple thing. Give me a value beyond the cost, right? And then if you look at the service providers, some of them are making significant investments on technology, on platforms, on cloud, on mobility, and that all is coming back to the service provider as a return of investments when they are going to the clients and providing them a roadmap to their business case, which is actually improving the value for their business. So I really don't see that happening unless some specific exceptional circumstances where the client has already got an IT investment that should take care of that piece. Otherwise, I don't see that happening.
So value beyond cost, value beyond cost. Right. We heard it a number of times today on the panel. It was a really key theme that came out of a lot of the discussions, both in terms of the questions and the discussion between the panelists. So let's talk about that a bit more, Arindam. I think we both agree that customers these days seem to expect value add from their providers in addition to cost advantages and standardization. Would you agree?
Well, absolutely, and what I was referring to as well during that panel discussion, right? If you really see the history of this entire outsourcing, it started off from where I would call that as a shared service consolidation, right? So you do a regional consolidation or you do a global consolidation, right? Which is better than a regional consolidation, and you're happy about it because you are shaving out 10-20% of the cost because of the consolidation. Then came the phase where you were doing a lot of process excellence, and that meant that you were locally driving a lot of Six Sigma initiatives. You were reducing defects in the process. You were doing some localized automations. You were sharing some best practices, and you were happy. The clients were happy. It basically has now come to a third stage, which I would call broadly as an operational excellence. And as I was mentioning in the panel, right, there are three broad components. I would call it. One is the IT-driven piece, right, which is pretty much the cloud and the platform, which, if we are able to provide, it will significantly alter the client landscape, right? Maybe at some point over time, it will drive a lot of consolidation from the service provider market as well. Now, coming back, one was IT, the second one was the process side, which is more about providing business process reengineering, end-to-end process understanding and optimizing that process by applying lean, for example, right? And the second piece is that you are working with the client to do a process benchmarking exercise. You are able to tell a client the process maturity, and then you are working with the client to take the decision once they understand what the level of the maturity of the process is. And the third, which is also a big piece, is the new service offering, like the analytics, even the consulting. So their lines are a little blurred, or would be blurred, between the consulting organizations and the BPO organizations, where we would be able, or we would be well placed to consult the clients in terms of some of the typical conventional consulting that you see in the space. And this is beyond the analytics, which is going to be the real big thing. So with all the three pieces, right, you see where it has moved. It has definitely moved beyond cost, and I was so happy to hear that, echoed that sentiment, both from the buyer side and the supplier side.
I think moving beyond cost was a critical component of the discussion today.
Absolutely.
But I guess an interesting commentary to make would be value beyond cost. Correct. Are those two customer requirements seemingly pulling in opposite directions?
No, it is not actually. So if you are outsourcing, right, and you get a cost advantage, ready-made. Well, that cost advantage is coming down because the labor arbitrage play is not as significant as it was 10 years back, right? But you still get a cost advantage, and the cost is the driver. So let's not make any mistakes around it. Cost is still the primary driver, right? But then once you have taken the cost out of the balance sheet, and that's like year one, the clients are coming back and saying, what do you do with the business in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5? You're kind of giving some improvements till year 2, year 3, and then year 4 it all dries up, right? So now the clients are saying that you have been managing our transactions for 3 years. Tell us more about ourselves and what we can do to enhance our position in the marketplace, whether it is even better cost advantage for them, or it is actually working with them to increase their revenue stream, right? And that's where things like analytics, things like platforms are coming into picture. So it's absolutely not driving in different directions. I think it's a natural evolution from one phase to another now.
Mm. So let's talk a little bit about, let's go down a slightly different path and talk a little bit about outsourcing.
Yeah.
Another key component of today's debate, captive versus outsourced, came up a lot. We touched on it from a few different perspectives. And something you mentioned, Arindam, that interested me was the future of BPO being BPaaS. That being so, assuming that that's the path that we go down, and assuming that technology and automation continue to push the boundaries of our industry, what are your thoughts on, would we then be outsourcing our core capabilities in 10 years' time? And does then outsourcing become redundant?
Yeah, so the debate about the shared service and BPO, I would say, is a debate that we should have long passed by 2 years back, right? It's now a case where, as I said on the panel as well, so we are working with the clients to actually set up their shared service while we are also having a BPO relationship with them, right? It gives the client that flexibility to balance out cost and risk and the cash flow versus change management and all those pieces, right? So it's no more a debate. Both can survive together, and both possibly needs to survive together in the changing scenario. BPaaS, as I said, is one of the big components. The other components, of course, is going to be things like analytics, right? But the BPaaS, the platform thing, definitely would materialize or should materialize in promise in the next 12-14 months. Look, I mean, it's an IT play, right? It's at the end of the day, we are IT-enabled services. So it all depends on how fast that IT offering is coming in, and that's coming in. For example, for us, we have made significant investments on platform on the cloud, right? That would enable enough scalability for the clients to move on to the platforms, right? And that's where the future would be for BPO. Now, once you move to that level, then that outsourcing word kind of still stays, because you still need to consolidate and put it in places which has got the labor arbitrage or which has got the center of excellence. But that's not the offering that you, as a service provider, I would go to the client. I would offer them an end-to-end service and say, this is the business impact I am able to make to your organization. So that relationship, that dialogue is at a different level compared to the dialogue which is right now a outsourcing kind of a dialogue.
What about the risk that you just touched upon? Let's talk a little bit more about perceived or actual risk.
Sure.
What kind of processes do you think might be deemed to be too risky to outsource?
Well, first cut, possibly none of them, but you really need to, it varies, it will vary from organization to organization, right? So if as a client organization, they need to look back and see, 1A, the maturity of the processes, right? That will possibly give them an indicator of what can be outsourced, what can be insourced, what should be kept within their country, right? Or things like legal requirement will also give them a better idea of where they need to do, right? But once you take all those factors out, then it's a natural progression that you move either by yourself or through a provider to go to that next level, right? And then the location should not be a constraint, because the risk element in terms of compliance, for example, is the same whether you are in California or you are in Bangalore or you are in Singapore or you are in London. You have the same approach, as long as you are putting a auditable enterprise security view. You should be fine whether you operate from any of the locations in the world.
Okay, thanks. I think to finish off, it would be remiss not to talk about big data analytics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think we both agree that the world's becoming increasingly more aware, more information savvy, but also more complex. SSOs are in a very unique position to actually analyse the data passing through their centres to provide the core business with actionable analytical insights. So my question is, do you believe outsourcers have enough intimate knowledge of the client's business to provide this level of value, or is it actually best kept in-house?
Look, so I will say, if you are in a BPO, that matters. If you have if you are thinking of an analytics offering, right? Because you have been dealing with the transactions of the client for years. Then if you really look at the client landscape, and it's after 5 years, you would not have a lot of retained organization with the client. Really, that knowledge, that idea, the business knowledge should and would reside with the service provider. So what do you have? You have a lot of transactions, you have the business insight, you have the industry insight, right? You combine all of that together and then add the process rigor. You are able to create what I would call a repeatable, predictable process of analytics back to the client organization. And you need to clearly distinguish the roles. Is the client organizations will decide on the strategy of their organization. Then based on that, it's the service provider who is doing the analytics, right? He is creating that insight, but giving the insight back to the client organization for them to make the final decision. So the service provider is coming somewhere in the middle. The initial piece of the strategy and the last piece of the final call is all still decided by the client organization. What the service provider is actually doing is that take that business insight, that industry knowledge, that business knowledge, and that ability to create a repeatable, predictable process and create that necessary insight back to the client organization.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Any key takeaways from today that you'd like to share?
I think it was fantastic. I saw a debate around the outsourcing versus BPO. I think I would be happy that if we had settled that debate. I thought we have settled the debate. I think you guys, SSO1 has been a perfect platform in actually developing and creating that awareness that the Asia Pacific and Japan market needs to actually get on with it and fully understands the benefits of whether it is a shared service or whether it is a BPO, but to understand and have the knowledge to go on to the path and at least take a decision, an informed decision of the next steps. So fantastic, and thank you guys for organizing such a mega and great event.
Thank you so much, Arindam. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure having you on the panel, and we look forward to 2013.
Absolutely, same here. Thank you, Jackie.
No problem.